Hello, everyone. Welcome to Conversations from the Alcove. My name is Caridad Svich. I'm a playwright and also the artistic director of the Lucille Lortel Theater's Alcove New Play Development Program. If you've not been to Conversations from the Alcove before, it is literally what it says. Conversations with usually playwrights, but not always, playwrights and theater makers focused on art, craft, and the world, not necessarily in that order. I will start with a brief audio description of myself before I introduce our guest today. I am a fair-skinned person with today my hair changes colors. My hair today is brownish with some gold flecks in it. I have bangs. It's to the side in a side ponytail. I have brown eyes. I have round tortoiseshell glasses perched on the very tip of my nose. I have red lipstick on. And then today I'm wearing my blue background top that has sleeping puppies on it. It's something to keep me smiling on dark days. And I'm also wearing stringy white headphones. Behind me is a blurred out background. You might see the outlines of a wall, maybe a lamp, a ceiling lamp, but basically it's blurred out. But it's real, it's not virtual. Today's guest is Shahid Iqbal Khan, who writes for theater, radio, and film. They are mostly known, although they've written many things, they're mostly known for their wonderful play 10 Nights, which was first developed in the Right to Play program at Graeae Theater. Would love to talk about that when we start discussing this. It first premiered at the Bush Theater in 2021. It was then revived in 2024 at Omnibus Theater and toured to Tobacco Factory Theaters and Curve Theater. The remount in 2025, opened at Riverside Studios before touring to Derby Theater, Lowry Theater, Lawrence Bartley Theater, and Birmingham Hippodrome. The play was also nominated for an Olivier, if I'm correct, in 2022. His play Agility was shortlisted for the George Devine Award in 2023. He's on the Genesis New Writers Program at the Almeida Theater and is the recipient of the Peter Shaffer Commission from the National Theater and is on attachment at Payne's Plough in 2024, was part of the Peggy Ramsey Film for Bursary. Many, many credits. I won't list them all because I'll be here all day. Also, I will say they're on attachment with us at the Lortel, working on a project. So yay and welcome, Shahid.
Thank you, Caridad. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. An audio description of myself. So I'm wearing a beige t-shirt, and in my lounge in my house in Bury in Greater Manchester. My background looking rather dramatic. It's got some shadows in the back. It's a light blue wall. And it's just gone dark, so the nights are drawing in. It's 7:15 at the moment, so I've closed the curtain, but I thought I'll leave the big light off because we don't want the harsh lighting. So I plonked in true theatre style, I've plonked two lamps here and created this voila dramatic version of me, which you now see before you.
Lovely, lovely. Thanks for that. So for those of you who follow the series, you know I always start with the same question, which is how is the climate crisis affecting your art practice?
It took me a while to ponder this question, so I thank you for sending the question in advance. And I think my first instinct was to say no, it doesn't affect my playwriting. But actually, it does. It does. It's just the lingo. I don't think of the lingo climate crisis. So how it affects is in terms of the character. So, for example, this year I was reflecting quite a lot on weather, actually, the heat, the long sunny days that they have in play. So like Tennessee Williams plays, I think A Streetcar Named Desire, but definitely Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, where there's a psychological sense of how hot it is. It's physically hot, but it's also like psychologically impacting the characters. And I've kind of grown up with that and seeing Satyajit Ray films as well, the Indian filmmaker, seeing his films, the Apple trilogy, Days and Nights in the Forest, where there are these long, hot days, and characters are under the most um, psychologically brutal and delicate condition throughout the whole movie or play. So I would see that, and I always saw that as something in another country, in the something somewhere else. But it hit me this summer gone that this could actually be a reality in a British play, that it's very possible in a British play to have a long sunny days where the characters are affected oppressively by the really hot weather, and the never-ending claustrophobic condition of that hot weather. And I think it's something to do with my thinking around catching up, because we still have it in our head that we are a maritime climate, a temperate climate, and you know, our seasons are relatively stable, so that we have mild winters and cool summers. And you see this reflected in a lot of the plays. So in many of the plays, I'm not saying all, but in many of the plays, the weather doesn't feature as an element. So, for example, I'm talking about the UK plays. So you could watch an Oscar Wilde play or a Noel Coward play, or maybe even an Alan Bennett play, and you'll notice that the characters will go from scene to scene, and the weather very rarely is something that stands in the way. It's rare for it to impact on the characters in the way that it might do in a Tennessee Williams play. So I think because we've grown so used to that kind of playwriting culture, that even as playwrights ourselves now, we still don't think about the weather so much. We still focus on the dynamic between the characters and moving from them scene to scene without thinking about the weather or the climate. So I was thinking a lot about this. I thought, well, what if you do start thinking about what weather it is? So I'm writing a play about Berry Market, which is a market in my hometown. I live in Berry, by the way. And for the first time, I'm actually thinking about where are they? I mean, I always think about where they are, but I mean, for example, if they're indoors, the market's indoors, is it well air conditioned? Is it, how warm is it? Is it hot or is it cold? Is it if cold, then how cold is it? And how is this impacting the characters? So that's what I was thinking about. And the reality is that we are getting very hot summers now. So in the 1970s, there was a big panic about, I think it was 1975 or 76, there was a big panic about the fact that the temperature had breached, I think, 35 degrees Celsius. Or yeah, and I think in Fahrenheit that's probably about 95 degrees or 96. So that was seen as a very like damaging event in the mid 70s. But But now it's very common and we don't bat an eyelid. So it's very common for every summer to at least approach 35 degrees Fahrenheit. And recently in 2022, we had the highest ever. It went to 40 plus degrees. So this is in the UK, really hot summer, and our buildings are not built for it. So our buildings are built to retain heat. So we have terrace houses. I myself live in a semi-detached house, so I'm next to a neighbor. So we often share walls, and our buildings are condensed together. And it's designed in a way to help protect her during really cold days in winter. But it's so hard in the summer. It's unbelievable. So it might be 40 degrees, but it's not the same 40 degrees that you might experience in Dubai, for example, where it's very well, where they know how to deal with that kind of heat with ventilation and air conditioning. Um, so it's 40 degrees, but it probably feels a lot hotter. Um, So I was reflecting on that and I thought, yes, I need to catch up mentally and face up to what's happening now.
Yeah, definitely. And otherwise, you said everything in the past, and we have like a series of plays globally that are set in some imagined past that has no relationship to the present, which I see people also trying to do because I think they're afraid of actually dealing with the reality of this. I remember being not even, I think it might have been 7 years ago in the UK for a summer, and it was blistering hot. And of course, there's no AC anywhere, so I kept running to Marks and Spencer. I spent like more of my time at Marks and Spencer. I would just hide there. If you don't know Marks and Spencer, it's a grocery store. It also sells clothes. It also sells everything. And I would just like hide in the grocery section because it was the only place that had like cooling, right? So I was like, because I was just like the tube is like hot and like the street was hot and the people that I was staying with had no AC. They just had one fan and of course, as you said, the infrastructure is not built for this. So I think they just kept saying, well, it's just a passing phase. And I was like, I don't think so. I think that something is happening. But I remember that just being blistering. And of course, I had a friend of mine who was like, I love this heat. It's so wonderful to be in humidity. And I was like, I don't like the humidity. I don't like the heat. Get me out of here. Wah. There's a lot of adjusting. But it's interesting that you mentioned Tennessee Williams because his work does deal actually with the environment in which his characters are in. He's very specific about making a relationship on. You can't imagine Streetcar like in another city, right? It has to be New Orleans. It has to be the density of the humidity in the air and the languorousness of New Orleans that allows for the characters to speak the way they do and behave the way they do, and be also upset with one another in a different way, actually, because when it's hot, people kind of tempers tend to flare, right? Or Night of the Iguana, which is set, in Mexico, and it's partly in Mexico, and it's sort of like dripping with heat, right? So I Tennessee is a wonderful example. Is he a writer that you are interested in? I wonder about your favorite writers or people that you were reading that you were like, I want to be a playwright. Like, how did that happen?
Yes, he is one of my favorite playwrights. Um, and I think it was Cat on a Hot Tin Roof that I saw, but as a movie with Elizabeth Taylor.
Elizabeth
And
Taylor?
yeah. Um, yes, I think I was very impacted by that film because I thought to me, it was astonishing that this was a movie from the 1950s talking about sexuality, and I didn't associate Hollywood film from the 1950s to do that. I always thought a film from the 1950s is going to be very safe, very boring, in an entertaining way, handy flaw, but they're not going to wrench with serious subjects like sexuality. So when I saw that film, and I was just blown away, I just thought, how remarkable that there is this from that era. And then I think I saw the closing credits, and it said or I think I read into it, and it said something about how it was an adaptation of a play. So it was in my head that I made that association then, that theatre is a place where you confront truths of the soul. Theatre is the place where you have intimacy, um, and catharsis, and you're able to really grapple with um, difficult subjects of the day. And cinema is not the place to do that. Cinema is the place for censorship, because I'm not even sure how much of the play actually was made into the film. I think there was some watering down. So when I made that association, then I think theatre just became like a friend, a place where I can express myself as who I am.
Very cool. That's fascinating. The movie made you want to write. Yeah.
Yeah, it was cinema that made me want to write for theatre.
That's, it makes me think about, that's beautiful. And it also makes me think about how it just, it was kind of a great reminder that, of course, a lot of those great plays were turned into film. And now that doesn't happen. And so I feel like that there's actually a generation that has no idea what theater is doing because it doesn't translate to film unless it's a musical, unless it's like Wicked or Dear Evan Hansen, or plays actually don't end up being translated. And so that's why I hunger for like things like NT at Home and like other sources that allow plays to stream, allow plays to be on demand, not just for global access, but also because see what we're doing. Theater is very strange because I think it tries to kind of protect itself from the audience. And I think that actually, in a way, right, like it's behind these walls, you'll see something. But we won't disseminate it anywhere else. And I'm like, one of the incredible things about movies like Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, or the film of Streetcar Named Desire, or, Sweet Bird of Youth also got made into a film, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, is that it was in the common parlance, and people understood that it was based on a play, but even if people didn't, they were like, oh, this is interesting. It's a little bit different from the usual movie, right? And I think that it made people curious about the theater. And I think right now and I think it's been for a while, but I think there's been a kind of protectionism. There's a kind of like, no, you can't know what we do, right? And I was like, no, people should know what we're doing. Like, it's important. And actually, they might understand that might potentially be interesting, and there might be like, a writer or a budding writer, just like you were, who were like, what is this thing that's so fascinating, right? So I'm, and this relates to something else. I was talking to playwright also based in the UK, Hassan Abdul Razak, recently, and we were talking about this idea of the well-made play. And he was talking about the well-made play equals the well-behaved play. And then, my sort of thinking around that is that feels dictatorial. Do you know what I mean? Like, it has to be well-behaved. So that real truth, the confrontation, that intimacy that you're describing is kind of damped down. It's kind of told to not be so in your face, as it were. And he said, we're losing something. And he was specifically talking about UK new writing, they said we're losing something in not being able to, or feeling like we have to adhere to the well-behaved, something that's well-behaved. And so I don't know if you have thoughts around that, or if that's something you experience as well as an artist in the sort of new writing field.
I think the phrase well behaved is so interesting, um, because it means you're not able to be ugly. You're not able to show the ugly parts of ourselves. So if you can't do that, then there is no catharsis. There is no moment of revelation, which is really interesting. I do kind of identify with it a bit, I think. Um, I think because there's a lot of emphasis on what audiences might find offensive, and this can come back in dramaturgical notes, and it can be some suggestion around an insult, for example, or a scene that might potentially upset a certain person in the audience. And so can we change this scene, or can we change the insult? And sometimes I found the notes useful, so I thought, yes, they're right. You can't have this word. How would I feel if I were that person in the audience? Some other time, I feel that there's a darkness that we should hold on to, and we need to know that this character would say something like that, and the redemption arc might never come. The moment might never come when the character said, "Oh, I was wrong to say that." Um, so it's about knowing when to toe the line and when to not toe the line. I think to have integrity as an artist, you have to accept the fact that there might be the odd moment when a big name theatre or any organization or theatre decide to not put your play on. I think you have to accept that if you want to stay true to your work and don't feel like you capitulated or you've sold out, and you want to stand up for it, there might be a time when your work isn't put on, and you have to be at peace with that, because as artists we are outsiders anyway. So our job is not to be necessarily in the mainstream. There's a lot of focus on success and on getting consistent work, and becoming a big name. But actually, I'm always a little wary of that. I think it's good to have regular work, but I'm also wary of becoming part of the establishment, because once you do, then you can't ruffle feathers, um, and you won't be able to sleep at night because you know that you somehow compromised in order to get your work put on. And I think I'm thinking now of the opposite of the well-behaved play.
The very badly behaved play.
Yeah. I'm thinking of the very badly behaved play and what would that look like? Um, Actually, I don't think there's a badly behaved play.
There isn't? Nowhere in the universe? Really?
Mm. I think I think in terms of as a writer, I think if you're writing truthfully, because you could go the other way and think I will be deliberately provocative,
Right,
and that could be also quite artificial.
right.
So you need to simply just be truthful and um and have courage in what you write.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. Being truthful in the era of post-truth. How do you how do you negotiate that? Does it wake you up at night? We're living in a post-truth era, as it's called, the era of misinformation, and we're trying to make truthful things on stage through fiction, usually, unless we're basing it on something that really happened. Um, and audiences are so accustomed to post-truth. I wonder how you negotiate. It's something that does wake me up at night as a playwright because I'm like, I deal in fiction, but I'm putting stuff on stage that the audience already is living in fiction. Or accepting fictions all the time, right? So I think that how do you kind of break through to make people see? I mean, in a way, it's like, how do you reveal truth in a post-truth era? And that's something, and maybe it's something we can't solve, but I think that as playwrights, it's something that I think is a unique challenge. I don't think that's quite ever happened before, historically.
When I speak about truth, it's about character and
Uh-huh.
um, are they doing what they would do as character. So when you sit with them and when you are the character for that duration of writing the play, are they following the path that they would go through? Have they started speaking to you? And have you honored that voice that they relayed to you? Or have you imposed something onto that character? Have you forced them to take a certain direction in order to fit in with what the commissioner wants? So that's the kind of truth I'm talking about. I think post-truth world, yeah, that's an interesting one because post-truth, what does that mean? I suppose that's referring to propaganda
Yeah,
and and when something is relayed, when something is conveyed through the news, someone else paints it as something else. So, for example, Trump saying that climate change isn't real.
right.
So, so that post-truth. Um, but I suppose in the play you would show the character reacting to something like that, um, and grappling with what is true and what isn't. Yeah, that's a hard one.
It is a hard one. I know we're still in the thick of it, it's just something that I think, I'm trying to draw equivalents with, the era when like I believe the earth is flat, and people are like, no, it's round. You know what I mean? And it's like, and so you have an audience that believes that a majority of the audience that believes the earth is flat. And then you walk in as the playwright, going, no, let me explain, let me draw a different picture of the world for you. So I'm trying to sort of find other equivalents or eras where, for example, as now, there's a lot of, what I call superstition, or like people sort of trying to chase um if you think about QAnon, or like, people chasing, going down these blind alleys, they're narrative alleys. I mean, what's fascinating about them is that they're all narratives, alternate narratives of the world. And they're using that as a way to understand their existence or to believe more in propaganda, right? And so it's a kind of indoctrination. But there are also people that are like truly like they actually believe this. Like it's a and so I'm just fascinated by that. I'm fascinated by that place of people where they place their belief in a narrative that's been constructed for them, and how they follow that narrative. Because in theater we do the same thing. We construct a narrative and we ask the audience to believe in it, you know.
Yes, and what you just said, the flat Earth versus round globe Earth, um, reminded me of the coverage of the genocide in Gaza, where I think it was a journalist that said, "Look, if it's raining outside the window, then I report that. I write that it's raining outside, but I don't draw an equal equivalent to someone who says it's not raining. If that person says it's not raining, I'm not going to include that as a quote in the article. To me, they're not both equal things. Um, so that reminds me of what's going on with this genocide, where the people saying this thing is happening. But on the other hand, this country who's conducting the genocide, they said it's not their fault, that they thought the person was a terrorist, etc., etc. But that doesn't outweigh the truth of what we're seeing. So when you put the denial of that country in the same article, you're giving it relevance. You're subconsciously saying that there's something to it. It's the same thing with any other subject, climate change or terrorism or whatever. You're stating the facts, but there's a question about should you really be quoting someone who denied that that has happened even though the facts are glaringly obvious. And I think, yeah, in theatre there is a thing about that we give voices to lots of characters and lots of viewpoints. But as playwrights, we get to choose the characters that have more stage time, right? So, yeah, there might be someone who said the earth is flat, but that might just be 10 seconds, you know. But then we already know that the earth isn't flat, but we might just be more interested in the characters who say, yeah, the earth is round, but it's blue. And another character said, yeah, the earth is round, but I think it's orange. We might be more interested in those dynamic of the different colors of the truth. So it all comes back to what we put in the spotlight on, essentially.
Absolutely, absolutely. I want to talk about your play 10 Nights, which is such a beautiful play, and it's had I love this thing that it's been revived several times, and you've had quite a journey with it. It's so beautiful. But how did it start for you, and how has it been to kind of revisit it over the recent years?
It started for me, so you wanted to speak about Graeae Theatre and
I
Right.
do, yeah.
So I got onto this fantastic attachment at Graeae Theatre in 2018. And I would say that was probably a turning point for me as a writer. Prior to that, I was being supported as an associate artist. I still am, by Phizzical Productions, which is a theatre company based in the Midlands, led by Samir Bamba. I acted in a couple of their plays, and Samir was very kind when he heard that I was thinking of writing, that I was, having a go at something. Samir was always very kind, and he was often touch base with me and say, how is that play going? Where are you up to with that play? So I sent in my first play, which was about deafness, a girl who is deaf and how she come to terms with it. Um, and it was based on some of my experiences as a deaf person. And it was also quite inspired by a streetcar named Desire, actually, because it was about two sisters and their distant relationship to one another. Samir was very kind to put that play on for a couple of nights in Leicester. So that was my very first experience as a playwright. But 2018 was a turning point because Samir said, why don't you apply to the development program in London? And to be honest, I didn't really think I would get in because I'm based in the Northwest in Manchester, and I'm quite content to stay regional because I didn't have any delusions of, you know, going beyond here and going into London and having to play on in London. But I followed Samir's advice and I applied for this attachment with Graeae. And I was very shocked to get in. But it just showed me that you have to be confident in yourself before others can start being confident in you. So yeah, I got into this attachment. It was Right to Play is a year. They don't run it now, unfortunately, because of, I think, funding cuts. But when they were running it, it was essentially a partnership with several theatres every year, and they would work with those partnership theatre to help develop the playwrights. And the development program would consist of masterclasses and development workshops and shared readings and assignment to they set you assignment to write 5-minute scenes. And one of those scenes was 10 nights. So it was about a man observing this practice of seclusion in a mosque in the last 10 nights of Ramadan. So I wrote that thinking that no one would pay much attention to it or interest in it. My mentor for the year was the wonderful playwright Oladipo Agbaluaji.
Yes, Depot.
Dipo, yeah.
Depot, yes. I love Depot. Yeah.
So very lucky to have him as a mentor because he was so gentle and reassuring. He took a look at my monologue about the character who essentially takes part in this seclusion. But the monologue was very different. It was set after the seclusion, so he had left the mosque, and now he was talking to the audience about how much it had changed him and how he's going to lead a different life now. It was Dippo actually who said, "Look, I don't know anything about this Ithaca that you've written. Like, what is it? What does it consist of? Um, and why don't you take us there? Why don't you take us into the mosque and show us it?" Um, I was very frightened to do so because I just thought, gosh, that's really scary to go into the mosque and to show, because the mosque is, a sacred place. It's a place of worship, and you want to make sure you get the details right. I know now that that feeling of being frightened is a good feeling because the moment you're scared, it means that you're doing something that's pushing you, uh, that's making you go out of your comfort zone. So I took his advice and I did the monologue. I moved the monologue to inside the mosque and showed the character Yasser. It was a 5-minute scene showing him grappling with what he's doing and how he's reacting to other characters within the mosque. It had a shared reading in Soho Theatre, and I was very surprised by the reaction. I was probably the only Asian there. I don't know if I was the only Muslim, but definitely the only Asian face. And I loved how the audience responded warmly to the character. And it showed me that actually it's not about religion. It's not about whether you know enough about Itakar. It's about the character. And they identified with him because he was very much a fish out of water in that scenario. Um, so they identified with what he was going through, his insecurities, his innermost thoughts. So I was very encouraged by that positive response, and I thought there's something here. And when the year was coming to a close, and there was a final assignment, which was to write a full play, and I decided to turn that 5-minute monologue into a full play. And then there was no looking back after that. I had a shared reading at Bush Theatre, and then it was commissioned by Graeae, Bush Theatre, and Tamasha. There was a slight delay because of COVID, so it ended up coming a year later in 2021, and so that was that production. Then the revivals after that, because Samir also loved the play, it's something that stayed with him. So he and his company, Phizzical Production, have helped keep the play alive. So they said that it needs to go out into community. So it's gone on several tours since then, and the most recent one was this year. And Samir is so ambitious, so he's not only thinking nationally, he's also thinking internationally. So he's thinking of taking it abroad, and he's speaking to all the countries like America, Canada, India. So I'm very lucky, actually. I never thought, from that day I wrote the 5-minute monologue, that it would have such a journey. But yeah, you never know.
I know, you don't know. And I'm interested in that space of knowing and not knowing, which is sometimes when we write, I think this is true of most writers. We're working on something, we're like, ooh, this feels good, right? Like we have that feeling of like it feels hot, it feels exciting, and we have a sense that maybe it will connect further, beyond your computer, right? But you don't, in terms of the business, right? The industry, you don't know. Like it's completely, if sometimes it feels completely random, like what takes off, what doesn't, like how people connect. Because it may be, it's not what I'd say is that sometimes it's not the fault of the play. Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes a play opens and just the audience doesn't connect to it, but it's not the play's fault. It's right. Like it's that moment in time, right? So, but I also think there's that thing that happens, which you've experienced with 10 nights, where it keeps happening and it's very successful and everything's great. And I think that as a writer, I don't know if you feel this way, but it also can create perhaps, and again, you may feel differently. Oh, should I write another 10 nights? Do you ever get that feeling of like, oh, let me do the next 10 nights? I want to have another big hit. You know what I mean? Like I think sometimes there's an undue pressure placed on you as a writer where you feel you've got to meet, or somebody asks you. I remember I wrote a play once that had done pretty well, and a colleague had said, "Can you write another one just like that one?" And I was like, "No, but I already wrote that one. I don't want to write that one again." And but it stayed in my mind because I was like, should I write another one like that one? So I wonder if you feel that pressure or not.
Not really, no. But there is something to what you're saying, which is that when 10 Nights happened, it was also the first time I heard the word momentum. So someone came up to me, no, it was someone wanted a meeting and we chatted or something, and they used the word momentum, and they said, it's great that you got there, but you need to keep it going. You need to um you need to do the next thing and another thing and another thing. And prior to that, I had never felt pressure about momentum. I had never thought about, oh gosh, it's been so long since my last play. So that's when it sort of entered my vocabulary, and I felt the pressure that I must stay visible, I must stay busy with something. I must be seen to be doing something. So I felt that pressure, but I've never felt the pressure to have another 10 nights, because I think 10 nights is unique in itself. Um, and then there's a lot more you can do with playwriting. So I'm currently exploring, big, large scale plays with lots of characters, or 2 to 3-handers. So yeah, I've never felt the pressure to do another play like it.
Yeah, understood. Yeah, I was talking to a colleague, Rajiv Joseph, who Bengal Tiger, Baghdad Zoo is going to be at the Young Vic, um, and he was talking about how when he wrote that play, it was of the moment. He wrote it directly to what was happening at the time, and now it's he's having a revival of it in London, and the play is now a history play. And he, as a writer, has never had that experience of like, I wrote this thing, it was in the moment, and did well, all those things. But now I'm treating it's being treated, and it's a play that's been historicized, right? Like it was about that time period. And I wonder if you think about your relationship to history or sometimes some writers say to me, I want to write something that's ahistorical so that anybody can do it at any time and it doesn't matter and blah, 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 blah. So yeah, so I wonder if you grapple with that at all, or does that not enter your consciousness when you're working?
To make something that's timeless,
Yeah,
no,
not interested.
no. Um, because I think if you're trying to make something timeless, you're and this is not a bad thing at all. I think you're also wanting to be remembered. You're you want to make sure that the plays are being done after you die, that it carries on being revived. Um, my thinking is very different. I don't care what happened after I die. Uh,
It's
like
not, writers are obsessed with immortality. What are you talking about?
like, yeah, like once I'm dead, I don't care what happened with the play. I won't be here, I don't know where I'll be. We maybe on another galaxy or whatever. Um, so yeah, it doesn't enter my space of thinking. Um, because it's something you cannot control. So I don't worry about things I cannot control. I can only worry about, this is why I'm a playwright, because the only thing you can control are the people on the stage, the characters on the stage. So you can move, you can move like a chess game of chess. You can move characters here and you can move characters there, and so that's how I get my sense of control. Anything outside it, how people react to it, whether people will remember me, whether people will think of me, that's not something I can control. Um, And because I can't control it, I don't really think about it too much.
It's interesting. Yeah. Rajiv told me that it made him want to write plays only set in the past because they were already history plays, which I thought was fascinating. I was like, oh, that's such an odd choice, but I guess that's what you wanted to. That's how he reacted to like feeling like he'd written something of the moment, and then he felt like that moment was slipping away in the sense it was being historicized already. He said, I'm only going to write things that are set in the past, so definitely a history play. There's no mistaking it. Like it's set, 500 years before or 20 years before, or whatever. I was like, wow, what an odd thing to do. But, it was his way of grappling with that dilemma, and maybe feeling
Yeah,
discomfort
he played
around
Guard at the Taj is a beautiful play.
history play.
And
Yeah,
yeah,
beautiful, gorgeous.
that, just that set during the making of the Taj Mahal,
Yeah,
um, and still very relevant to today because it's about what you can and cannot say, what
right.
you can and cannot believe.
Mhm.
The thing about history is that you might very well have a history play that's popular in one moment, but then it's forgotten about for the next 100 years or forever until somebody finds it again and goes, "Oh, actually, this is probably relevant to our time because
Mm.
it talks about this." Um, and you find that with Shakespeare a lot. Like you'll find that
Yeah,
certain plays are revived, or so some plays are forgotten and never brought back, but then somebody does it, and then it's a constant revival, it's a constant reinterpretation. Um, King Lear is very popular, um, and I'm not sure how popular it was at the time or that it was
yeah,
written,
yeah,
but it's very popular now because it is about mortality.
yeah,
Um, it's about aging, and we're all living longer. We're all growing older and living longer, and thinking about our place in society. So we connect very much to King Lear. So you could, yeah, you might go, all right, this is timeless, but it depends on what the audience find in it that they feel is relevant to them.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
I
interesting.
actually, I think I have, yeah, I have a couple of plays that sort of talk about things in the past or something that's happened. Um, but the question that we always come back to is why now?
Right.
So the theatres are always looking for relevance. Um, yeah.
Yeah, there's that funny thing that we had Simon Stevens on recently and giving a workshop for us, and Simon said something really fascinating about Shakespeare and Brecht. And he said that he feels that Shakespeare and Brecht are essentially not the same playwright, obviously, but they were both interested in similar things, in entertaining the audience, teaching them something, bringing them into an experience, and he contrasted that with Beckett. He said Beckett doesn't care, like to bring you in, to draw, to seduce you, to entertain you. He's not interested in that. He's interested in something else, a different kind of theatrical experience, and you have to meet it on its terms. Um, and then he started talking about like how he started to make categories around certain writers that fall into the Beckett camp and certain writers that fall into the Brecht and Shakespeare camp. That's how he was defining it. That's how he was, I'm just quoting Simon, which I thought was interesting. I hadn't heard anybody talk about that before, in quite that way. And so, I wondered to that end about there's something about in the Beckett, if you think about the Beckett line, which is you have to meet the play on its own terms. You have to figure out the play, basically. And when you see a Beckett play, you're like, what the hell is happening? Okay, I need to figure it out as an audience member, right? And surely as an actor as well. But when you're in a Shakespeare play, you know you have a plot and there are characters and this happens and then that happens and then okay, there's cause and effect and all that stuff. So so I wonder where does it even does this even enter your mind when you're writing? Like, do you hold up, for example, this kind of theater, that kind of way of making, or that other kind of way of making? Do they combat each other? Do they like fight each other in your mind, or do you not care? Do you like I'm just gonna write my play and that's it?
Oh gosh, what a question. Oh, um, I don't know. I think I just follow my instinct. Um, it's very hard to pin down. Gosh.
Mm,
I think some plays I'm happy to just follow my instinct and not need to spell everything out for the audience and to just let them find it on its own merit. Um, and then there are some plays where I think it's important to have a good flow of story, a conventional narrative, because I want the audience to feel something. So I think it's about what do I want the audience to feel? Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and so maybe it's that um if it is like a Beckett play, um, or Pinter play
right,
even,
yeah.
um, it's that I might maybe I want the audience to be a little bit confused, a little bit out of their comfort zone and trying to put things together. Um, and if that's the experience I want them to have, then that's the kind of play I would be thinking of. But if it's a play where I want them to be entertained and maybe learn something, um, then I would think of the other kind of more conventional narrative play. Um, so it very much depends on what do I want the audience to get out of this particular play. Um, and coming back to dramaturgy and feedback and theatre, you'll find that they don't like the Beckett kind of play. That they want a play that is does make sense narratively. Um, so it's up to you as a playwright to know when the feedback seems true or relevant to you. Um, so particularly in this day and age where there isn't much space for experimentation. So, for example, I'm in Manchester, and you know, there was a time when you could get your plays on in places like Contact Theatre, um, or the Royal Exchange Theatre had like a studio space, and there were places where you could sort of experiment, try things out. Um, and I think COVID sort of put paid toward that. Those places kind of shut down. So what we're left with are the big spaces, the main stages, and the theatres want those to be put bums on seats. So they veer toward the narrative play. And it's very tempting to get influenced by all that and think that you must write a narrative play. Um, but you have to follow your own instincts. Um, and you have to be comfortable with the fact that the play might never get put on. So you've got to follow your instinct as a storyteller, as a theatre maker. I mean, I always find it interesting when I hear stories about, Ayub Khan Din. His East is East took 15 years to get put on because he started writing it in early 80s, I think, and then it premiered in Birmingham Rep, I think, and Royal Court in like the mid 90s. Similarly with Angels in America, that play, I think it took at least a decade to sort of come to fruition. So I think you have to be comfortable with how long your play might take. You might put it away in the drawer, but it doesn't mean that it would never come out.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that's
Keeping the
such a,
faith, keeping the faith, right?
but such a interesting category of the Beckett play and the Shakespeare playwright. I don't know. I think you could also have a play where there's both, you know?
Which is where, I sometimes think of Sarah Kane's Blasted that sort of wants to do both, weirdly. The first half of the play is kind of, in fact, both halves are quite Shakespearean if you think about it, except that she does sort of like Beckett via Shakespeare in the second half. And the first half, it's, the contours are very Pinter, but it still has a kind of like, we understand to some degree, what the relationships are between the characters, and there seems to be cause and effect, and all of that stuff, before the play starts to kind of fragment and atomize, purposefully, for both political and for dramaturgical reasons, in the play. But it's fascinating, and I hadn't really heard anybody. As when Simon said that, I was like, oh my gosh, I want to start making lists. So like the Shakespeare people and the Beckett people. And then they're all gonna and then there are people that crisscross, between them, or maybe try to combine them. I sometimes think about Susan Laurie Parks's plays that kind of sometimes have both going on. Whereas her earlier work was much more in sort of the Beckettian, is much more like meet me on my own terms. But she's figured out different ways in her more recent work to kind of blend some of what she's done before and into this other kind of more, let's say, conventionally narrative shape. But yeah, but it's just always interesting. Also, those are arbitrary categories, but I think it's fun to entertain them nonetheless. We're almost at time. I'd like to leave with maybe something about what's inspiring you these days, maybe something you're reading or something you're watching, or a book that's on your night table, like anything like that.
Um, uh, the studio. So, the studio is,
The TV series?
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just enjoying it. I think it's also a lot about cinema. So it features Seth Rogen and Catherine Hahn, all these fantastic actors. Um, and it's very much a comedy, and it feels like it's set in the dying days of cinema, and they're grappling with that death almost. But I just love it's a comedy of embarrassment, I think, and I love seeing characters put themselves in cringy situations and try to sort of get out of it, but they dig in the well even deeper.
Yes.
How about you? What are you watching?
What
What's
am
in
I, well, oh my gosh, so many things. I mean, the one thing that I keep returning to is actually Catherine Lacey has this new book called The Mobius Strip, and it's basically a split narrative. So one side of the book is this memoir that she's written about a breakup, a very difficult relationship that she had. And then you flip the book over, and there's a fictional story that has some of the same themes and sometimes some similar scenes, but it's a complete, like it's a fiction, like it's fiction, it's other characters, it's other, and the book is, you read it, you flip flop, you can read one section and then you read the other, or you can tried, I mean, I haven't done that yet, but you can read, maybe the provocation is that you can read part of it and then flip into the fiction area and then flip into the autobiographical. And I just, and of course it's all about this, that fiction and autobiography are blend, and what is really the writer doing, you know, in a sense. And it's a kind of contemplation of that. But both sides of it are fascinating. And the fiction story holds up. You could just read that on your own, if you wanted to, or you could just read the memoir part. Yeah, I love the provocation of it, and just the dare.
That's
It's a
so
dare. It's a
interesting.
dare.
Yeah, that's so
Isn't it
interesting
cool?
because it's trying to talk about how much of the artist's life infiltrate the fiction that they write.
Yeah.
So how are you finding that? Are you finding that a lot of the things in the autobiography section are making its way into the fictional novel?
They do make their way, but not in a like one-on-one. You know, it's a little bit more sly the way it's happening. But you know, you kind of get a kick out of it. You're like, oh, I understand what that is because I read it in the memoir part, and now I'm seeing it here. And it's just, I mean, it's about writing, right? You know, it's about the act of writing, and so yeah, it's such a cool idea. I haven't seen anybody really do that before. I mean, I think the last book that I read sort of not quite the same at all. But Ali Smith did this book. I can't remember what the title of it was. Was it How to Be a Girl or something girl in the title? And it was double facing. So it had one narrative was on one page and another narrative was another, and it was separated by history. So one side was like I'm trying to remember, it's like 15th century or something like that. And the other side was a contemporary. And they were both about women and kind of trying to find their agency in the world. And but they were literally side by side. So you would read one page and then you'd look at the next page and you were like, oh, what is this? And then you'd kind of flip. And so you had to sort of negotiate those as you read it. But that's the last book that I remember of recent kind of, you know, late 20th century into 21st, that actually is trying to grapple with this in a similar way. So yeah, so I'm just entranced by what Catherine is doing and how she came up with it in the first place. You know, I just find that all like so cool. And yeah, and I love that it makes me think about like plays that would put the writer on stage. There's a lot of plays that do that, where the writer is like, hi, I'm the playwright and I'm, you know, writing this play. And so I'm not saying that I want to do that in theater necessarily, but I'm intrigued by this notion of like actually showing the audience. But also what I love about it as a reader is that I get to choose which side of the book I want to read. And so there's something about that. It's like the act of agency for the audience.
What you just described made me think of certain play texts. I don't remember the titles at the moment, but the plays by like Alice Birch and Ella Hickson, where I
Yeah.
don't know if you've ever seen the play text, but there's three different stories going on at the same time, and
Yes.
the
Anatomy of a
character,
Suicide by Alice Birch has the, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So what you described, I mean, I've never seen the plays in person actually, but I've only ever read them. Um, but what you described made me think of those play texts where you can choose to follow one strand if you wanted to,
Yeah.
and then go back and follow another strand.
Mhm.
Or you could read all the lines at the same time if you've got three different brains.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I imagine, I think someone on Twitter even once put a question out. How do you write a play like that? How do you format it? I
Yeah,
myself,
the formatting, I'm so bad at you know, I'm like, can it just be the easiest formatting possible? I am tired of like, I just was reading a play that I won't divulge, but the writer did all this cool formatting in it. And I was just like, oh, I want to get into their computer and figure out how they did this. Cause it was literally like, there was all these spacing things and then font sizes that were changing line to line and things were jumping around on the page. And I was like, so cool, but I can't, I would go, you know, I kept thinking it's hard enough to write the play. I don't want to be doing this too. You know, so it was like,
yeah, in
it's a lot
it.
of work.
Be- Yeah, I find it a headache to go back and correct spelling errors and
I know.
capitalize and bold font, or it's just a headache. Um, yeah, because when you're writing, you're following the story and the characters that they come to at that moment.
Yeah.
Uh, Formatting is a completely different brain, I think. I think it's something you would have to do. I always see it as another brain that you have to put on. Um, so when I'm writing, I don't care about spelling mistakes or the format or how it's laid out or whether a line is clunky even. I just get it all out. Um, and then I feel that that's the creative brain. And then I give it some time. I come back to it weeks later with a different brain. And then I look at the spelling error, the boring bits. Um, and then I read the play out loud to myself. Does it sound clunky or not? And so, yeah, it feels like there are different brains that you have to wear as a playwright, but you can't wear them at the same time. Do you find
Yeah,
that?
it's too hard. It's just too hard. One brain at a time. One brain at a time, please. It's hard. Like I said, it's just hard enough. Sometimes you're just battling the play. And I think there's also the thing that plays, I think, live in a dream space. Like you're thinking about them all the time. If you're working on it, you're like, it's obsessive and you're kind of, oh, I wonder what the character is doing right now if you're writing character, or what the situation is. And you're also letting the world inflect the play, which I like to do. Whatever's happening in the world is obviously affecting what the play is doing. And it doesn't mean that I'm calling it out, but it's more like I understand that I'm in relationship to the world when I'm writing. I'm not like in a hermetic box. And so yeah, I try to keep myself very open when I'm writing, in that regard. So the idea of formatting on top of that just gives me a headache,
Yeah,
to be
yeah.
honest.
Um, yeah, because you're also writing when you're not at the laptop, aren't you? Or when you're not with the
Right.
right because thoughts
Yeah.
come to you at all times of day when you're driving, when you're washing the
Yeah.
dishes, when you're having a
Yeah.
shower. Um, yeah, and the challenge is to remember those insights that come and to quickly write it down or to save it in your phone because it can go just like that.
Yeah. It can, it can. Well, speaking of going just like that, we're at time. We're slightly over time. It's been so fabulous. So much fun to chat with you. Yay, we did it. Past episodes and future ones to come, of Conversations from the Alcove. Please read if you can't see it, if you can't fly to all the places where Shahid is doing work. You can read the work, find it at your local bookstore or at your online bookseller, and follow Shahid's writing. And for now, I'll say so long on this end. Thanks for coming to Conversations from the Alcove. Bye.